Hello. The Christian Institute has been raising concerns about the online safety bill, and today the government has announced a number of changes to that bill. And here with me now to help us understand those changes is my colleague and the Deputy Director for Public Affairs here at the Christian Institute, Simon Calvert. Simon, thank you. The bill is going back to the House of Commons on the 5th of December, and the government has confirmed that it is going to drop the key issue that we were concerned about, that section on legal but harmful to adults, remove those provisions from the bill, and also the controversial harmful communications offence. So this sounds pretty much like good news.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so the Christian Institute supporters have been contacting politicians about this, and in fact, I think the first meeting that we had with officials about it was beginning of 2020. So we've been engaged in this battle for a long time. You see, here's the problem, and we've seen this so many times here at the Christian Institute. The government identifies a real problem where we all agree that something needs to be done, but then it legislates in a way which goes far wider than that and creates a bunch of other problems. And that's what's happened here. We all agree that a lot more needs to be done to make online space safe, especially for children and young people. But the proposals that the government brought forward, like this legal but harmful for adults threshold, it just created a huge risk to free speech. The last thing we need is further emboldening liberal tech valley billionaires to tell us what we can and can't say online. And that was what the bill was going to do. So the government has rowed back completely from that. The whole concept of legal but harmful will get stripped out of the bill. And that is great. And so we're grateful to the government for that. In fact, the minister herself invited us to a small round table last night. So I sat across the virtual table from the minister while she explained these changes, and then I got to ask her some questions about what that was going to mean. So, you know, they've taken the concerns from free speech groups and from Christian groups very seriously, and they've tried to respond to them. The harmful communications offence, that too was something where, I mean, again, do we want people to be protected from harmful communications? Of course we do.
Sure, yeah.
But they come up with a form of words which just tramples on ordinary, innocent free speech, throws a big question mark over all sorts of things that people should be allowed to say. So that too is going to be dropped entirely from this bill, and that is also very welcome. So, you know, we must give thanks to God for that. I think our supporters...
Thank our supporters, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, they've been the ones writing the letters. And then the reservation I have about it is that the government's now talking about new provisions to empower users to block content. Well, that's great. Mm-hmm. We specifically and repeatedly advocated to the government, you know, empower users.
But there's this issue on incitement to hatred, isn't there?
Right.
So you were just saying about the significance of wording and the question marks that get raised over free speech as a result of that wording. So yeah, I did want to pick you up on this point about the incitement to hatred wording. The problem is that the word hatred has kind of become code for we disagree with you and therefore we don't want you to put across your views. So just in a different context, non-crime hate incidents, for example, sort of seem to fall into that category. So what I want to ask you is, what is this going to mean, this incitement to hatred clause, provision, set of wording, what is that going to mean in relation to our concerns that we've previously expressed about expressing mainstream Christian views on marriages only between one man and one woman, you cannot change biological sex, you know, the kind of views that were once universally held but are now deemed to be contentious. How are they affected by this change?
Yeah, so the meaning of the word hatred has been completely hollowed out by activists who just routinely accuse you of hatred just for disagreeing with them. And that's the problem. So again, we were able to put this directly to the minister last night. And in terms of their direction of travel, you know, I'm content that the government is trying to do the right thing, that they don't want ordinary innocent Christian content to be blocked by social media companies. But a lot will depend on the wording of the legislation. So we'll have to wait and see the government's new amendment. And then then there's the role of Ofcom, and then there's how the social media companies interpret it.
Is there something more you can say about Ofcom? Because that was another one of our
Well, Ofcom will produce the guidance on how all of this is going to be implemented, but our key concern that Ofcom would be dictating to social media companies what legal but harmful meant, that just goes away.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, we're going to have to wait and see the wording of the amendment, and we're going to keep representing to government, that they need to be very careful that when they use the phrase incitement to hatred, that tech companies don't think that that means silencing Christian views on sexual ethics or gender identity and that sort of thing.
Because we have been here before, haven't we?
Right.
Specifically on the hatred point. I mean,
Yeah.
We haven't got time for a full history lesson, but going back to sort of 2001 and since then, I mean, perhaps you can just help people understand why this wording around this term can be so significant.
Yeah. So supporters who've been around for a long time, like me, will remember that from 2001 onwards, the Labour government wanted to outlaw incitement to religious hatred. Now, again, on the face of it, we're all against inciting religious hatred, so have at it. But no, they identify a problem this big, and then they propose a legislative solution this big that tramples on all sorts of innocent free speech. And so we and others had to work very hard. In fact, the House of Lords defeated the government and inserted safeguards in that legislation. And then in 2006, that kind of time, we worked with Lord Waddington to put a free speech clause in the incitement to homophobic hatred offence for the same reason, that it was just too broad as it was. And then just in the past few years, we did a bunch of work with allies in Scotland as part of the Free to Disagree campaign when the Scottish government introduced its own incitement to hatred offences. And there was huge controversy over that. So what we're saying to the Westminster government now about this is, don't get into the same territory because other governments have tried and failed, and you need to tread very, very carefully in this area.
Okay, so last thing, there is good news in terms of protections for children, isn't there? Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, we all want to see children and young people better protected online, and there are lots of things that this bill is already doing, and now lots of new things. So, for example, forcing social media companies to properly age verify their users. And so when they say, under 13s aren't allowed on our platform, that is actually implemented. Yeah. And so that's very welcome. We're all worried about how our kids are being affected by social media, not just by content that's inherently damaging, but just by the addictiveness of it, just by how their self-image is affected by it. Yeah. And so I think the more we can do to force social media companies to be responsible in how they treat underage users, I think the more the better. It's hard to believe that social media companies haven't taken action.
Yeah, I think most people would be quite surprised that things like encouraging acts of self-harm or even to suicide, so on and so forth, that these things weren't already restricted or outlawed.
Yeah, the basic problem, as many people have said, is that with social media, the user is the product. Mm-hmm. They are selling the user to advertisers. Yeah. And so this is the problem. They just need more users and more clicks. And
whatever it takes.
And yes, almost whatever it takes to get more users and more clicks is what they'll do. So they haven't been responsible. That's why the government is having to legislate. We can be glad that something is doing. I'm sure more will have to be done when it comes to protecting children and young people. And one thing I do want to say about that is that this bill does introduce age verification for porn to try to stop children accessing porn online. And that's clearly welcome. Yeah. But there's two things to say.
There's a couple of issues with that, isn't there?
Yeah, number one is legislation to do that went on the statute book in 2017 and they didn't use it. And that is an absolute travesty. They should have just implemented that back then. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of kids could have been protected in the meantime. The second thing to say is...
And I was just to say, our friends at CARE were very... spoke out very clearly on that particular issue, didn't they?
Yeah, CARE have done great work on this consistently and would want to pay tribute to that. The second thing, and we and CARE have both been trying to persuade the government on this point, the provisions in this bill on age verification for porn lack clarity, and they really need to improve those provisions. So that's a job of work still to be done.
Okay, so if we just summarise briefly for people who are watching, legal but harmful to adults, is gone. That's good news. The harmful communications offence, that's gone. That's good news.
Yep.
Protections for children in the main are as they were or better, which is good. Some issues around age verification on pornography, that's a specific concern. And then there is this significant question mark over how the precise wording of incitement to hatred will fall out. And we'll keep you up to date with progress of this bill and any concerns as they develop. So if you're not already signed up to the Christian Institute's mailing list, make sure that you are, and we can keep you informed about the progress of this bill and indeed other pieces of significant legislation for Christians. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Simon.